Welcome to the tutorial video on learning JavaScript ES6. In this video, I'm going to talk about default parameter values. So very commonly when we use functions, and especially constructors within JavaScript, we're taking values in and then sometimes we have to test those. Did we get the values we expected, or are we defining default values, and then we have to deal with those. And it's very, very common when using complex parameters and dealing with whether or not certain parameters have been defined and certain ones have others, and trying to set different parameter values. Frequently, when we deal with this problem in other versions of JavaScript, we would need as many lines of code as parameters to check those and then set the default values and make sure we had those before we dealt with anything. To help with that exact problem, ES6 has given over this new syntax called default parameter values. That is, that allows us to set the default for the parameters within the definition of the parameters, so that if values do not come in to override those, they have those values. They are the default parameter values. So it's not a very flashy syntax change, but it is incredibly helpful for the very common problem I described earlier of checking to see if parameters have values and then setting them to new values or setting them to default, and it makes testing tremendously easier, knowing there will be a default value for these parameters if we use this syntax method. So let's look at this code. You notice here on line 2 I have a function called example. In its parameter definition right here that I've broken up over multiple lines, you see it looks like I'm using the assignment operator. Well, I am, sort of. Notice here on line 3 it says name equals Steve, age equals 43, and address equals 1234 Green Road. In each of these cases, I'm setting the default value for each parameter. Notice the comma between these. In previous versions of JavaScript, we would just have these names. They would just be names of parameters. In this case, with ES6, I'm defining their default values. So we see name equals Steve, age equals 43, and address equals 1234 Green Road, as I mentioned before. And so if I don't do anything, and I just use this function, these parameters will have their default values. And in fact, I'll run that and show it. So we see right here, which is exactly what happened right here. So within this function, it called console log and gave it parameters, name, age, and address, and their values were the defaults we set within the parameter list itself. So, not a very flashy thing, as I mentioned before, but incredibly helpful. Very, very helpful when dealing with functions, and especially with dealing a problem in other versions of JavaScript with constructors and having to test for values and giving them default values. Now we can simply define the defaults within the parameter list of the functions we're using, and not have to worry about those, and not have to worry about, does a value have it, is it undefined, or whatever. No, we can simply set the default values, and then when we test for those, or when we use them, we can simply look for those values as the defaults, and then do something based on those values. Thanks for watching.